Hey guys, Harv here, and welcome to episode 5 of our space tourism series. The previous episode will have been a live stream uploaded from twitch.tv in which the goldfish happened to join us for the creation of a basically terrible single-staged orbit. But yes, it used 2-meter radius parts and it had all 2-meter diameter parts and it had all sorts of other problems associated with it. Essentially, it wasn't very good. And it was a live stream, which is an interesting format. And the reason I say it will have been rather than it was is because I'm now recording this before that has even been released. So I don't know whether people like that format yet or not. Whether people are okay with the occasional episode of Space Tourism being an uploaded live stream. We'll see, we shall certainly see. But yes, the current project, which was obviously started in that previous live stream, was to make, or is to make, a passenger single-staged orbit, and then use that to get into low-carbon orbit to dock with a space station, and then perhaps the passenger tourists will transfer to a different shuttle to go all the way out to Jool. We don't know, maybe, it depends. So yes, that one was a fail, and so we're going to have to try again. We're going to have to build something that's a bit more sensible, because, you know, we're here, we're making rockets, we ought to be sensible whilst we do it. So using similar levels of fuel, apart from we're not going to use a hitchhiker storage container because that's 2 meter diameter, we're going to use 4 of the lightest command pods instead. We're not going to use the quarter-sized big tank that is 2 meter diameter. No, we're going to use 2 of the long-sized 1 meter diameter tanks. And we're actually going to use 2 of them, which means that we're going to have double the liquid fuel that we would have had otherwise, or double the oxidizer, seeing technically we have very similar amounts of liquid fuel, I think, because of the tanks for the jet engines use only liquid fuel. But double the oxidizer, which means technically, although this thing looks slimmer, it's actually going to be a lot heavier than the other one. And you may think that's going to be a problem. Well, no, because we're going to have, I think we're having more wing surface. We either have more wing surface or just generally a better aerodynamic design. It definitely is a better way to go. And something I've recently started liking is also this wing tip idea. Rather than having tail fins on the actual, you know, center of the body, we can have them on the wings. And they tend to help with stability, I find. They especially work well with the new updated Advanced SAS. I say new, I mean the update's been out for quite a while, but it is still new in terms of the game's development. Essentially, it's not finished. And you may be able to hear those sounds in the background. Now, if any of you heard those sounds, those weird beeping kind of blip sounds, and checked your Steam, I should either applaud you or smack you, because that was the sound of Steam sped up to 4 times. How would you recognize that as a Steam sound? Gah. I mean, I make this pun every time about, hey, yeah, you checked your Steam, but it never seems to get tiresome, so I'm gonna keep on doing it. Yes, whilst I was building this, it was very late at night and I was messaging people on Steam at the same time. How very unprofessional of me, not putting all my effort into making the plane. But never mind, the plane is now made, and it's going on its maiden voyage. Let's see how successful this is. We have a few action groups, if I remember correctly, I'll go over them in detail. That is, the first action group is to turn off all of the aerospike engines and to close all of the intakes, which is important, because an open intake has more drag than a closed intake. So it's technically more efficient if you're not using the engines to close the intakes at the same time. That's what the first action group does. The second action group actually deactivates only the outer 2 jet engines. Or toggles them, I should say. This is all toggling, not technically shutting down. If they're on, it'll turn it off. If they're off, it'll turn it back on. And the reason I'm going to have that is because at the higher altitudes, when we don't have much air intake, kind of like where we are now, it's probably going to be easier to run all of our intake air into just 2 engines, rather than trying to supply for all 4. And we shouldn't really get a noticeable change in thrust, because we do have to throttle down due to the lack of air anyway. So we're going up, we're going up. I think we either skip turning off the engines in this particular flight and go straight to the liquid fuel, which, there we go, we'll go straight to the liquid fuel, which, of course, is action group 3. There we go, turn off the outside engines as well. So we're climbing, we're building altitude, we're using our liquid fuel tanks, I should call them oxidizer. They're oxidizer tanks. Rocket tanks. There we go, rocket engine tanks. Now all the jet engines are turned off because we're going up to altitudes where they can't possibly function. This isn't a spam in air intake single stage to orbit. This is technically I can't talk. This is technically a legitimate plane. You know, there are some designs which have like 25 million thousand ram air intakes. This one only has a few Ranger 1s and one ram air intake per engine, so it's pretty legitimate. Using the aerospike, using those massive amounts of liquid oxidizer in the centre, we can get our apoapsis up just out of the atmosphere. That's the only thing I don't like about this plane design. On its maiden voyage, yes, it works fine. It's absolutely great. I can't believe it's working. It's that good. But it doesn't have the fuel to get up into a higher orbit, which makes rendezvousing an interesting challenge, and that's something we're going to have to come on to in later episodes. So we're out of the atmosphere now, and we are coming up to our apoapsis. We start burning along the prograde line, or just slightly under because we burnt a bit too early. We do have quite a strong engine. We don't really need to be burning this early. But burning underneath, trying to circularize our orbit. There we go, have a periapsis, and 73 and 70. So not quite circular. I spent a bit too much fuel accidentally, but we do have some fuel left. So if we were to have a space station orbiting at 70 kilometers, and I was very careful, we probably would be able to use the aerospike somewhat to get ourselves over to it. And seeing as we are carrying RCS fuel, we also have RCS thrusters which we can use to maneuver and dock. And using the RCS fuel out of those tanks will make our ship lighter and thus more efficient in the future. Whether or not we're going to actually use this, whether or not we're going to take this design out to Jool, I don't think so. I mean, I mentioned once that we would kind of strap nuclear engines onto the sides, maybe onto the wings or something. But I'm not too fond of that plan anymore. So this will be a shuttle up to a luxurious space station in orbit, and then the passengers will get out, they'll maybe spend a week getting used to, you know, just spend a week cruising on the geosynchronous or low Kerbal orbit space station. And then we can probably have a range of different flights out to Jool. Have a standard shuttle, something that can carry, say, 4 Kerbals and a pilot in a hitchhiker storage container with a few nuclear engines, and then maybe we can build up and make an artificial gravity space station, an artificial gravity interplanetary vessel, so they can maintain their, you know, they can prepare for being on and inside a gravity well rather than orbiting by having artificial gravity. If you haven't seen my artificial gravity videos, and if you're wondering what the hell is he talking about, go watch those videos. They're the most successful videos on my channel. Just click the HOCgaming thing near my profile picture, go onto my videos, most viewed, and you'll see them all there. Really happy that's the most successful thing. It does say something good about YouTube, that the thing I enjoy the most and I'm most interested in is my most successful series, which I'm quite happy about. But hopefully I'm equally interested in this whole concept, this whole entire project thing, and hopefully will become quite successful as well. Always want the people to view, always want the views. So we've been into orbit, we proved it, we are out of the atmosphere, we can orbit for all we like, we're never going to fall back down until we span around, we burned retrograde, we slowed our orbit down, we started to fall back towards Kerbal, and I overshot the trajectory a little in order for the atmosphere to slow us down. Notice that I've got the intakes open, because again, more drag means that we'll be able to slow down a bit faster. And we do judge it quite right. The silent game noise at the moment is a bit disconcerting, which is why I'm talking a lot. Although then again, I always talk a lot, so I shouldn't have really said that. But turn on the engines, turn on at least 2 of the engines, actually using the intakes now, rather than just using them to slow down a little. And we come in, swap back to 2 times speed from the 4 times I was using in the editor. Coming in for the final thing, this is the maiden voyage of our passenger jet, 1 time speed now, real time. This is the maiden voyage of our passenger jet single stage to orbit, and it was completely successful in every regard. Open up the wheels, coming in nice and gentle onto the runway. We're a bit high, but it shouldn't be a problem. And yes, I'm really quite happy with how successful the flight was. Oh, apart from that, yeah, that was to be expected. It was a safety feature. We were testing the new high priority, you know, politician or celebrity class seats. These two in the middle, these ones, they pay about twice as much and they get a definite, you know, saving thing. Okay, so maybe it wasn't supposed to happen, but still, that was the maiden voyage and it was quite successful for it. So maybe that's something to work on in the future. In the future, what we're going to do now is actually give ourselves a target. Now, there is something already put in orbit, which was a failed recording of an episode I was going to do. And then I've recorded it, I put a small little fuel tank in orbit, which is actually this that you're looking at right now. And then I looked back at the footage, about 3 hours of footage I'd recorded, and thought, this is boring. I'm not going to make this an episode, this is completely boring. So I got rid of it. I deleted all the footage. So there is one slight inconsistency in the universe, and it's just the fact that we have a fuel tank already orbiting Kerbal. But never mind, it's fine. We don't really care about that. I'm sure I can miss out the occasional little bit without anyone complaining too much. But here we go. What are we building now? We're going to build a docking array to dock onto our low Kerbal orbit fuel depot and start building our space station out. This particular space station we're building now is going to be more of a service station. The plan I've got in mind is for there to be 2 copies of most things. So for the actual Kerbal pilots and engineers, which this stage of the project is, we haven't got any tourists actually flying with us yet, we're going to make serviceable space stations so we know how it's done, we can work it out as we go along. For when the tourists are going to start opening their wallets and paying to have a good experience, we're going to be sending up a whole load of cosmetic, aesthetically pleasing space stations. You know, instead of the functional kind of, hey, it looks alright because it works, space stations will have ones that actually look nice. Big open panels to look down and view geosynchronous heights of different, you know, bodies and moons and Jool and things. It should be fairly good. Hopefully it will be fairly good. So, what have we done so far? Well, we've built 2 docking ports onto the side here. It's a bit of an interesting array, isn't it? Not something you'd expect. Well, our plane, if you remember, just think back a few minutes. Our plane has got 2 docking ports. It's got an inner body of 2 fuel tanks. Now, that means it's not symmetrical along the inside of one tank. It's split into 2, which means we can't really... There's nowhere suitable to put just the one docking port. There's nowhere suitable just to put the one docking port. So if we have 2, we get the bonus of also having increased, you know, durability. The access to it will be a lot less wobbly than it would be otherwise. And that's why we've built the array like it is. We've had it split into 2 parts, which we know are going to be exactly identical to the distance between the ports I've now added to the spaceplane. And we know it'll definitely dock together fine. Rendezvousing is the problem. Rendezvousing is the challenge. Rendezvousing is what will happen in the next episode. Well, technically we're going to have rendezvousing in this episode, but this is going to be with rockets, so it's not going to be quite as interesting. But here we go, launching up, getting all of our thrust from our Spacia launch stage 2, which I still like. I haven't really thought of any major improvements to make to this, apart from exactly how you fly it. The engineering itself is pretty solid, just not running it at full throttle would probably save some fuel. But you know, this is quite a light payload, so it doesn't really matter. In fact, as you'll see later on, as we swap now to 4 times speed, as you'll see later on, the full throttle problem, saving more fuel, doesn't matter so little. It matters so little that we actually end up dumping a load of fuel in orbit, which we probably will come back and use because, you know, it's in orbit, it's in quite a decent orbit, or at least it will be in the future. But the problem is I forgot to add a probe body in order to deorbit the thing we've got at the moment, the big tank that we're going to be getting to orbit with. Now that those outside pair are empty, once we get to the apoapsis we start burning again, and we can drop them. There we go. So they'll fall back to Kerbal, but now what we're using to rendezvous won't. So it's, you know, it's debris. And we're getting into orbit. rendezvousing with the fuel tank we have up there. The fuel tank design is quite nice. I think it weighs... Does it weigh 100? No, it probably weighs 80 tons or something, so it's quite a lot of fuel up there. And it's also got RCS tanks as well. So there's a whole range of things, some nice big solar panels on there, all sorts of different things that will provide the fuel, the meat for our space stations. And there it is, LKO Fuel Depot, which rhymes, because they both have O's at the end. We're going to get closer, we're going to still using this big, massive, long, unwieldy stage, and in fact if you look at the fuel depot, it's still got its big, massive, unwieldy stage attached to it. We're using launch stages the same over and over again because it's easier than building them each time, but it means that it's so over-equipped for the size of what we're doing right now. I mean, we're not carrying like 100-ton payloads into orbit, so we're just leaving these massive fuel tanks around. I mean, the first one can stay on the station and be used as an extra fuel depot, because it doesn't have to be rendezvoused. But the problem with this is that we'd have to rendezvous the entire thing, and there are no reaction thrusters on the launch stage there. So we've detached from it now, and it's just going to float there in this 90-kilometer orbit. Yes, 90-kilometer orbit. How high can our SSTO go? 70 kilometers or 75 kilometers to push it. So we're gonna have to do something about that, aren't we? Our space station at the moment is in way too high of an orbit. We need to bring it down the orbit. And yes, we do have our big launch stage still attached on the end of this the end of this continuing space station. So we can probably use that in the future to bring ourselves down to a 70-kilometer orbit. But there we go. For this episode, that is the end. I've got nothing else, nothing more else footage words. Ow. I've got nothing else to say. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was entertaining. I hope the constant coughing wasn't too bad. And I shall see you all in the next one.